second of the Bonfim brothers. Hey, brother.
Hey, hermano.
We have Gabriel Bonfim taking on the sniper Mounir Lazzez out of Tunisia. Very fun fight in this UFC welterweight division. And we have a lot of fights like this on this card where it's somebody who has experience in the UFC and a winning record taking on a debuting fighter. I mean, look at it for Gabriel's brother Ismael taking on Terrance McKinney, who's already 2-1. Gabriel takes on Mounir Lazzez, who's 2-1 in the UFC. And for Mounir Lazzez, look at the wins that he has. I mean, hell, the win he has in the fight of the night against Abdurakhimov now ages very, very well. He loses to Warlley Alves because he got kicked by 3 of the hardest tie kicks to the body I've ever seen in my entire life. And his last time out, all 3 judges scored at 30-27 against Luan, who likes to strike from the outside, and the sniper sniped in that fight. And for Gabriel Bonfim, what got him to the dance, it's definitely his boxing. And his brother has a boxing record, and so does Gabriel. But for Gabriel, he was a Brazilian super welterweight champion. And that does kind of account for something, and he was able to get a 5-0 record there. But if you do consider for a guy like Gabriel Bonfim, boxing from the outside, he is very well-rounded as well. An undefeated, squeaky clean record. He also happens to be an LFA welterweight champ. Now, LFA's kind of given that welterweight rub to some guys that you might go, Nacon Mendonça, like the guy that's over with Bellator, huh? Or Carlos Leal that ended up over with the PFL. But for Bonfim, he was able to get that before he went on Contender Series last year. Derek Krantz also happened to be a welterweight champ over with the LFA, and it didn't work out in UFC. But for Gabriel Bonfim, Matt, I know we're both excited about him. Yeah. But I don't want to just prop up Bonfim too much to take away the shine from Lazzez, because both these guys on the outside are very, very accomplished strikers in MMA.
They are very good, but they both do it in a very different way. For Lazzez, like you said, he does like to kind of wait for the fight to come to him, counter-strike from the outside, and he is very effective in that manner. But I look at this fight like I've looked at a lot of different fights on this card. If Bonfim can throw in combination, and that's really going to be the key too, I think he's going to have to really mix in his combinations, because if you go single shot for a single shot, Mounir Lazzez is a big guy for this division. I know they're both listed at 6'1", but Lazzez has a very big frame, and he has big legs too. And I know he was on the receiving end of some kicks against Alves, but I do think that at that range he can have some success with some of his longer range strikes. But if Bonfim backs him up between those 2 black lines, which is a position that a lot of guys do struggle with, like, okay, Dustin Poirier can fight behind there, Conor McGregor could in his prime, but there's a handful of fighters that can really excel on the back foot. I think Bonfim can have a lot of success if he can push Lazzez back, but that's going to be the really interesting thing, because if he can't throw in combination to get Lazzez's respect, it's going to be really difficult for him to push Lazzez back, because Lazzez is such a big physical guy for this weight class. And I think in the clinch, it will be interesting, because both guys could have success there, so I'm not really sure who's going to initiate some of those areas first. I think Lazzez might try to go for it, just because Bonfim, for him to have success, he's going to be close to him. He's going to have to use that boxing like we've mentioned on multiple occasions now, and for him to use that boxing, it's going to make him close enough for Lazzez to try to tie up, and I think we will see that a lot. If he can't have success with his own counter shots, it's probably just going to be, hey, get rid of the separation, put out that fire, because the thing about Bonfim is, if he gets into a rhythm, it's really hard to get him out of that rhythm.
And it's kind of tough, because with both of these guys, I think striking defense-wise, for a couple of guys that are primary strikers, Mounir Lazzez actually does a better job at open distance. Gabriel Bonfim, for what it's worth, holds his hands really wide apart, like it's a boxing stance without the gloves, and he gets hit down the middle. If you go back and watch his last fight on Contender Series, he was on the same card as his brother, and he took on Trey Waters. Trey Waters came in on really short notice for one of the best names in MMA, Felix Klinkhammer. And in that fight, Trey Waters was landing the jab on the outside. Now, Bonfim was touching him up, had his right eye swelled up, ran in for a double leg, got caught in the guillotine, and out of that, used the shoulder pressure to get a Von Preux choke. And we're going to talk a lot about Vince St. Preux on this card, because Shogun is on this card.
That time a skateboard got thrown into the cage?
That was wild. But if you do look at it for Gabriel Bonfim, and I go through all of the fights that he had, the one that he had at LFA 126, his opponent weighed 175.8, so he couldn't win the title. He looked really good in that one. He looked great before that with the LFA. And I'll show you, like, in his fights, he's not just taking on striker, grappler. Like, the fight that he had at LFA 112, it was against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And I'll put it up on the screen, the combo he was able to land in the second round. This guy goes body head, and he has such speed and power in these combinations that he kind of catches his opponents off guard.
And feel free to disagree with this point if you want to, but I think Bonfim's better than Luan. Like, I think he's going to offer up a more difficult matchup. I just think stylistically, Lazzez is going to have to be on his P's and Q's with his counter-striking. Like, it's really going to... there's a small margin of error for both guys in this matchup, because let's say Lazzez lands a good shot, kind of gets complacent on the back foot. I vividly remember Andrei Koreshkov fighting Douglas Lima, and I know
which one?
The positions were different, but in their second fight, Koreshkov's going to town on Lima, beating the brakes off him, hitting him with combinations up against the cage. Lima does the duck, roll, counters him with one shot and puts him down.
And Gabriel Bonfim does the same thing, plant
exactly
that hook.
And that's the thing. If Lazzez does get caught with his arms out, away from his head on some of those counter strikes, Bonfim's really going to make him pay for being out of position in those areas. That's why I do think Bonfim is just going to offer up a more difficult stylistic matchup.
Which might be a weird thing, because here's the lasting thing I want to leave with people, like a B-dub-dubs fact. For Mounir Lazzez, you said it. I mean, both guys are listed as 6'1". Lazzez has a reach advantage, and he uses that in the majority of his fights. He did that his last time out. Bonfim, until 2018, when he was 21, was a lightweight. And then he moved up to welterweight. And he's starting to fill out. You can see it for sure. He's only 25 years old. But the thing that might kind of counteract or contradict what we've been saying about the boxing from Bonfim is that 10 of his wins are by submission. 10 of his submissions are by choke. And normally he gets it done on the ground. That's rear naked choke, triangle choke. He gets it done by Darce. He's not a guy that's going for the legs. It's going for Kimura sweeps. He is very adept on the ground. It's just that his hands set up a lot of the things that he can do on the mat. So really eager to hear what people have on this fight, because I think the underdog sleeper here is Mounir Lazzez. And we'll have a look at the Tapology votes on this one. Bonfim, Lazzez, surprised us, it is to you. I'm going to say over-under. I think it's going to be close. I'm going to say over-under 65% Bonfim.
I like where you set it at. I'll say over, but I think it'll be very close, 65.
891 total votes, 82% Bonfim, 65% by submission for the 18% that have Lazzez, 66% by decision. And again, that's why I kind of set it up that way. A lot of people are going to talk about the submission abilities of Gabriel Bonfim. It's just to show how well-rounded he is, that he doesn't have to get every fight finished on the mat. He just so happens to be a great fighter on the mat.
But hopefully not like Carl Roberson.
No, that's true. Old Carl. But when it does come to that Serrato MMA type, he is a very good counter-striker, like his brother, like his sparring partner in the same weight class, and a guy like Vicente Luque. It's just, I worry about where he could get caught by some of those straight shots. And I actually happen to like the takedown defense of Mounir Lazzez, who, out of the two losses, one of them you got finished by Warlley Alves. One of them you got finished by a champion from overseas, an Eldar Eldarov, who's great on the mat. So eager to see what we get out of Lazzez, because if you're not picking him, I feel like it's kind of one of those ones where you're going to be scratching your head by the end of the fight.
Well, I will explain why I'm not going to pick him then. For Lazzez, again, I think he can have success counter-striking, but the problem is he doesn't have as good a volume as Bonfim on the outside if they're just throwing combinations, so the numbers are probably going to be on Bonfim's side. And if Bonfim can draw out the counters from the counter-striker, it's like putting a wrestler on his back. When you draw out the counters from the counter-striker, it's going to, again, leave a lot of those openings. And I do think the counter ability of Bonfim, based off those combination strikings, is going to be difficult for Lazzez. Just who's going to be moving forward more often in this fight? If Lazzez is able to get in some of his kicks and again be the bigger guy, because I can't stress this enough, I know it has their size, I guess the reach kind of gives it away. Lazzez is a big welterweight, so I will be interested to see how that size does affect Bonfim, but I do have Bonfim at the end of the day.
Lazzez landed 141 significant strikes against Ange Lusa from distance, and if you consider the 3 fights that Lazzez has had in the UFC records only have it if you've had more than 5 fights, they put you in the all-time record book. But if he was 7.4 significant strikes landed per minute for Mounir Lazzez in 3 fights. That would have him tied for 7th all-time if he had 5 fights. And he throws kicks like an MFer, especially in the 2 wins that he had, the one against Hassan and the one that he had against Losa.
But what I said midway through was, and feel free to disagree with me, I think Bonfim's better than Ange Lusa. That's all. He throws in combination. When he gets in the pocket, I think he's going to be a lot more comfortable in the pocket. And I think those pocket exchanges are where Bonfim can have a lot of success. Again, I'm not discounting Lazzez's chances in this fight whatsoever. I'm just saying I like the combinations on the inside from Bonfim a little bit more. I think it's going to be difficult for Lazzez to find some of that success while he's also trying to defend in the pocket. That's all.
I have a hard time picking this fight. I actually have Maratinia Gabriel Bonfim. I think he can pressure in this fight, and the trouble that he has in a lot of his fights, again, his hands are here, he can get hit at distance. Mounir Lazzez has a great opportunity in this fight. I hope I've laid that out if I've done anything. But with Bonfim, I struggle with the counter shots, but I love them. It's just that effect of the ground game. I do like the takedown defense out of Lazzez. I just think that there's more ways to win for a guy like Gabriel Bonfim in a matchup like this, so I'm not completely sold on that submission ability just yet. I'd love to see it. I think this is a great and competitive fight, and just about 60% at Fight Night Picks in our Instagram poll poll have Bonfim to win. So a little bit different than the Topology votes. Both of us going with Maratinha, Gabriel Bonfim to get the win. I think it's a great fight coming up this weekend. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.